I am honored to be here today, sharing my research and insight on this esteemed platform. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Judith Mossman for her exceptional organization and kind assistance throughout this event. I am also grateful to the University of Coventry and the International Plutarch Society for their support and collaboration. To avoid boring you, I will only present a small portion of my study, which I hope to share in its entirety in the conference proceedings. Why were parallel lives translated into so many languages in the 15th and 17th centuries? This is the time when Western Europe was rediscovering Greek language and culture, and Plutarch's biography as well. To understand it, I have limited the analysis of the case of Marius translations. I am analyzing and comparing the editiones principes of four translations of Marius Life in different languages, notably Latin by Jacopo Angeli, Italian by Battista Alessandro Iaconelli, French by Jacopo and English by Thomas North. After a general survey of the four translations to check the degree of fidelity to the Greek text, I will focus on paragraph 11.1, in which Plutarch reinvents the ancient metaphor of the state as a ship and its leader as a captain. I will compare the rendering of this metaphor in the four translations to verify on specimen of emblematic significance and high stylistic care the overall features and specific strategies implemented by the translators. I will also try to explain how they face linguistic difficulties concerning Greek with respect to the characteristics and limits of their languages, and how they appropriate the original text and interpreted it according to their sensibility. Finally, I will try to establish whether and to what extent language barriers and social conditioning affected the outcome of their translation work. Stock observes that Jacopo Angeli from Scarperia occasionally struggles to fully comprehend the Greek text due to corruption in Plutarch's original writings. At the other times, he makes errors even when the text is free of corruptions, likely due to the complexity of the vocabulary and syntax. However, despite these frequent occurrences, they do not undermine the value of the translation, which overall effectively conveys the essence of Plutarch's work. Jacopo adheres to Chrysolares' guideline of avoiding word-for-word translation, which may explain the numerous omissions and additions he makes in comparison to the original Plutarch text. Pede argues that Jacopo Angeli was the first to publish in a Latin translation of one of Plutarch's life directly from the Greek. In relatively few years, he translated Brutus, Cicero, Pompey, and Marius probably before 1406. According to Costa, Iaconelli's adaptation of Plutarch's lives from Latin to the vernacular language has barbaric and harsh syntax, rough style, and laborious expression. This was because the translation was not directly based on the Greek text, but rather on Lapo di Castelluccio the Younger's Latin version. The decision to forgo a literal translation, which would not have been suitable for a work explicitly dedicated to the unlearned masses, was one of the most successful aspects of Iaconelli's adaptation of Plutarch to the vernacular. It has been reprinted 4 times. There have been numerous attempts to translate the leaves into French. Fascina compiled a list of French translations of the lives prior to Amiot, but no one reaches the quality of Amiot, who was also the first to translate Marius' lives. According to Fraser and Guerrier, Amiot worked directly on the Greek text as a philologist. Translating in the 16th century was a political act aiming at enriching French culture and asserting the superiority of the French language over the other vernaculars. Let's not forget that it was even King Francis I who invited Amiot to translate the lives. Furthermore, a threefold goal can be identified into the translator's work, elucidating the realia, using a precise vocabulary, and shaping the syntax and the style of the text. Amiot used internal explanatory glosses, whereas we resort to external culture notes to make the ancient word and its custom more accessible to the modern readership. According to Lucchesi, following the tendency displayed by many translators of the Elizabethan era, North creatively engaged with the parallel lives, giving them a decidedly dramatic dimension. This is particularly visible when, for instance, his English translation amplifies Amiot's more simple expression, presents colloquialism where Amiot employed the judicial tone, or introduced the imagery of fight where Amiot preferred a more gentle and neutral tone. In general, North usually added the picturesque effects to the narrative by choosing emphatic terms and by inventing powerful words and metaphors. At the same time, he always maintained the musical rhythm and the harmony of the sentences, which already characterized Amiot's version. A first example of translational approach concerns the rhetorical use of status that Plutarch employs to introduce the protagonist. This reading external characteristic, the status foreshadows the moral attributes of his character. Wilgo has coined the device iconism, and in my forthcoming thesis I have proposed the term speaking status as its definition. This structure is present in Marius 2:1. The figure of the speaking statue is not captured. Where Plutarch used the term legomene, Angeli remained silent. Iaconelli simply states shows, Amiot and of course not right, represent. Plutarch's moralistic approach is reflected in his iconographic descriptions. Rhetorically, this is achieved through the skillful use of hypotyposis, a literal device drawn from a strong tradition but renewed and adapted to his own purposes. Another illustrative example of translational approach pertains to the portrayal of Marius' humble origins. Although historically inaccurate, Plutarch strategically employs this detail to serve his moralistic narrative centered around the concept of shifting fortunes. It is interesting to note that while Plutarch merely mentions that his father shares the same name, Angelo and Iaconelli, on the other hand, feel the need to specify Marius. Amiot, being more faithful to the original, avoids the redundancy of repeating the name. Interestingly, North, translating from Amiot, also feels a similar urge as Angelo and Iaconelli, but without knowledge over their tradition. He does not write that he is called Marius. Instead, he uses Caius. According to a study by Pade, Plutarch's writing is characterized by theatrical terminology with metaphorical value. In some cases, translators bring out this aspect by using a vocabulary that diverges from the original text. One example is found in a passage from the life of Marius, where the Romans, after pursuing the fleeing Cimbri back to their fortifications, witness the killing of the Cimbri by their own woman, who they committed suicide. Plutarch described this event as tragikotatos pathesin. As Pade states, Amiot's interpretation is perspective. By introducing the reference to sight, he demonstrates an understanding of tragikotatos, not as a generic allusion to the tragic content, but rather to the visual nature of the spectacle it presents. This interpretation aligns with the context of Plutarch's work, where the focus is on the Romans as spectators of a tragic event. More psychological, it is worth noting that Amiot employs a general noun accompanied by a pair of adjectives, emphasizing both the significance tragikotatos and pathesin. The chosen adjectives purposefully underscore the visual dimension. The translation by North obviously presents the same characteristic of that of Amiot. The translations by Angeli and Iaconelli propose more significant issues, in contrast to the more refined translation by Xilander, which Pade compares to Amiot's. Angeli's translation exhibits numerous uncertainties. While accurately portraying the Cimbri's flight towards the fortified camp, Angeli's attempt to capture the essence of pathesin leads to the choice of patior, which, however, alters the intended meaning of Plutarch's theatrical sentence. This data confirms what Stock argued about Jacopo Angeli's tendency to transliterate Greek terms whose meaning he didn't know. This modification confers a dignity upon the barbarian's death that is not explicitly conveyed in Plutarch's original text, thus diminishing the sense of tragic spectacle. Iaconelli, following Jacopo di Castelluccio Latin version, provides a more faithful but stylistically rather rough rendition. Having provided a general and somewhat limited overview of the translations, considering the insight of previous scores, It is now time to delve into the passage of Marius 11:1. I have chosen this passage because it represents a pivotal moment in the narrative, marking the onset of the war against Cimbri, and because it encompasses a metaphor within it. It is intriguing to examine the translator's approach towards such a rhetorical device. The analysis of their translations will be approached by addressing the three issues. What are the origin of this metaphor, and what function does it aim to fulfill? How has it been translated in the four ediciones principes? How have linguistic barriers and political social influences impacted the rendition of the texts? Step 1. Plutarch reinvents the ancient metaphor of the state as a ship and its leader as captain. Marius came back from Numidia, however he cannot peacefully celebrate his triumph, because a great danger threatens Rome, the immigration of the Cimbrians and Tons. Plutarch portrays the nature of the war against the northern peoples through a powerful metaphor. The peril of this war is symbolized by the word kludon, meaning wave. This war is depicted as a turbulent sea that has the potential to annihilate Rome. Carnini's study on the rhetorical construction of the life of Marius delves into the function of meteorological and maritime metaphors within the Cimbrian excursus. According to him, this metaphor served Plutarch in highlighting the beginning of the digression, emphasizing the danger posed by the enemies, and linking the entire story through cross-referential rhetorical connections. This metaphor intertwines with the depiction of a ship, a stereotypical allegory for the state. It's its captain who will navigate it during the conflict. Step 2. I will compare the rendering of this metaphor in the four translations to verify the overall features and specific strategies implemented by the translators. Marius' triumphant over Jugurtha becomes to the target of envy and animosity from the city's most influential figures. With his populist leadership, he humiliated the corrupt aristocratic class, yet, despite their grudge, no one dares to challenge his exceptional qualities. When faced with the imminent barbarian threat, the city set aside its envy and hatred, prioritizing the salvation. While Angeli's translation displays his usual uncertainties in rendering the terms sonon and mise, Iaconelli, following Jacopo di Castelluccio, captures the essence of envy but overlooks the notion of hatred. As for Amiot, his translation stands out its maturity and thoughtfulness, showcasing his linguistic proficiency and deep understanding of historical and political context. North faithfully follows in Amos's footsteps, maintaining the integrity of the original text. The translators indicate that Italy is the object of the imminent storm. It is interesting to observe the different interpretation of Plutarch's intricate passage. Plutarch refers to Italy as a subject in danger, expresses the idea that Italy is an extension of Rome itself. In Plutarch, Italy is not just a geographical unit, but specifically refers to the garden of Rome's home. The reference to danger is found solely in Amiot's translation, and as a result in North as well. This aspect is directly tied to Plutarch's theatrical writing style, which Amiot and North faithful preserve. Their translation of Plutarch play a pivotal role in the transition of parallel lives to Shakespeare, who discovers the material readily available and perfectly suited for his use. We now come to the metaphor of the captain and the ship in turbulent sea. The image of the ship during a storm as a symbol of the state's dates to Alcaeus. The initial association between the Kubernetes, helmsman, and the statesman can be found in Themis, although its definitive success is marked by Aeschylus in the Seven against Thebes. This metaphor is also utilized by Polybius and Horace. A significant reference for understanding Plutarch's usage can be found in Plato's Politicos 297a. Just as the helmsman, by taking care of what benefits the ship and the sailor, not through written laws, but by making his skill the law, saves his companions. Similarly, a just government cannot be achieved if those in power prioritize their abilities over the law. The influence of Plato is primarily postulated based on a political significant aspect. The helmsman, to save his companions, can transcend the boundaries of the law. This is what is demanded of Marius when the people oppose the election of other citizens who have a greater claim to hold the consularship for that year. In fact, following that metaphor, Plutarch clarifies. Everyone opposed the candidacy of men from powerful families, whether due to nobility or wealth, in the consular election, but they elected Marius, who was absent. The familiarity of metaphor and its political significance would have been known to all four translators, who were well versed in matter of governance, except for Iaconelli, who opts for a light thought, suggesting that there were not many capable commanders available. The others translated the passage almost literally. The case for a skilled ship captain becomes imperative to save the city from the raging storm of conflict. Plutarch's metaphor is intricately crafted. With the final sentence, he steps outside the realm of metaphor to evoke a pathos-laden effect on the reader, immersing them in the grim reality of war. Without any doubt, war is the storm that resonates in all translations. Their faithful attest not only to a deep understanding of Plutarch's rhetorical strategy, but also to a shared concern for the perils of warfare. Plutarch's educational purpose finds its way into the translations as well. Each translator dedicates his work to a noble figure who holds the power to shape peace and war. In turn, the translator assumed the role of Plutarch, the educator. They embrace his political idea of highlighting the powerful through philosophy and the exemplary lives of great historical figures. Step 3. This connotation allows us to introduce the third and final question. I will try to establish whether and to what extent language barriers and social conditioning affected the outcome of their translation work. All four translators, much like Plutarch himself, were actively involved in the political landscape of their time. Each of them embarked on diplomatic journeys representing prominent figures of the era. Jacopo Angeli served as the papal secretary under anti-pope Alexander V. As the Chancellor of Rieti, Iaconelli was sent as delegate to Ferdinand I of Aragon. Amiot undertook missions on behalf of the Council of Trent, later held positions as the head of the Order of the Holy Spirit and as a bishop. North engaged in diplomatic missions both in France and the Vatican. And at the Vatican, striving to establish closer ties with the Catholic Church on behalf of Queen Elizabeth I. The so-called thresholds of interpretation by Genet help shed light on the motivation that led to various choices in translations. We will analyze two types, the dedication and the title of the paragraphs. Dedication. In his dedication to Giobbe Resta, Jacopo Angeli paints a rather unfavorable portrait of Marius, staying true to Plutarch's depiction. He juxtaposed Marius' traits with those of Resta, highlighting the stark contrast between their virtues and vices. Marius is depicted as illiterate, while Resta, true to his name, is portrayed as remarkably cultured. Resta's wisdom stems from his profound philological knowledge, while Marius' ignorance arises from his lack thereof. Furthermore, while Marius comes from humble origins, Resta boasts a noble lineage, while Marius is driven by excessive ambition, Resta embodies humility. The translation of Iaconello's lives is preceded by several dedications. To the sonnet titled Lo excelso ingegno et fantasia sublime is dedicated to the judge of L'Aquila Jacopo de Peccatori, and it provides an explanation of the subject matter. Another sonnet titled Foron le muse al tucto già sbiandite is dedicated to Cosimo de' Medici, with its closing lines directed to Lorenzo the Magnificent. Following this, there is a dedication to Ludovico Torti, and in the explicit section, acknowledgement are given to Domenico da Montorio and Ludovico da Camillis from Ascoli. This dedication confirms the educational spirit and the strong bond between the intellectual and the powerful that is characteristic of Plutarch, which D'Angelo and Iaconello embraced in their translations. Another threshold is represented by the titles given to the paragraphs by Amiot and North. Their works have a more popular approach, and the presence of the paragraph titles could serve as a convenient tool for the reader. Amiot places in the titles at the beginning, creating a kind of index that explains the topics of each paragraph. In the North editions, we find the titles alongside the individual paragraphs, making them more prominently visible. These titles are more concise compared to those of Emiot. The indication of a topic or a title for an individual paragraph is quite significant as it reflects the translator's interpretation, who select what they deem to be the most important theme. The title given by Emiot to Marius 11.1, Useless Opposition to the Election of Marius, carries a significant meaning. Emiot places greater emphasis on the internal issues of Rome, particularly the ongoing dispute between the optimates and populares, and highlight the moral vices that posed a real threat to the city, envy and hatred, which were the root causes. Emiot's attention to these vices can likely be attributed to the consular climate, characterized by conflict between Christians themselves during the religious wars between Catholics and Protestants. Surprisingly, North, building upon Emiot's translation, better captures Plutarch's intention with his title, The Coming into Italy of the Teutons and Cimbri. This demonstrates both Emiot's meticulousness in translation and North's remarkable sensitivity. North is more concerned with international affairs and to conflicts with the other nations. In 1580, the year of the first edition of his Lives, North served as captain in Ireland. During that time, he personally experienced the tension between England and Spain, with the imminent threat of invasion. This event occurred 8 years before the publication of the second edition of his translations of Plutarch's works. Today, only a few of the numerous findings from the study were presented, yet they are sufficient to address the initial question. Why were Plutarch's parallel lives translated into so many languages during the 5th and the 7th centuries? There are several factors to consider. On one hand, these works generated significant interest among the societies that existed during those centuries, including the noble courts and royal families, as well as the emerging upper bourgeoisie, a new social class at the forefront of the European economy. Additionally, we cannot overlook the sensibilities of the intellectuals of the time. Jacopo Angeli and Iaconello display a tendency to emulate Plutarch in his approach to the rules he encountered, such as Trajan and Hadrian. Plutarch acts as a mentor who seeks to befriend the rulers to educate them in virtue. But how does this education take place? Through highlighting a sample of vices and virtues. In fact, in his dedicatory letter to Giobbe Resta, Jacopo Angeli even contrasts Resta's virtues with the vice of Marius. The moral and the political function of Plutarch's biography found fertile ground among the 15th century translators. However, they still faced linguistic difficulties that they were unable to overcome. Angeli's translation was modest, while Iaconello's was a sample transposition from Latin. Greek was still a foreign language within Western culture. With Emiot, there was a significant change in approach. In the 16th centuries, the study of Greek had become more refined. Emiot produced a translation of the highest quality, paying meticulous attention to the details and often feeling the need to explain his choices through glosses. His work was so refined that North was able to translate it into English without relying on the Greek and, remarkably, without losing valuable elements. In fact, in some cases, North's interpretation aligned more closely with Plutarch than even Emiot himself. This is evident in the analysis of the title choice in the passage from Marius 11.1. While Emiot focuses on internal rivalries within Rome, North is concerned with the invasion of foreign forces. This reflects their respective historical and biographical context, as Emiot was engaged in the Council of Trent, while North navigated in the long rise of the Elizabethan England with Spain. In conclusion, it can be said that Plutarch's biographies, particularly the life of Marius, achieved tremendous success in terms of translation and subsequently in terms of audience reception due to their ability to addressing enduring anthropological categories through edifying biographical narratives. Thank you very much.